Okay, so now we've disassembled the complete air valve. We're going to go ahead and build it back up. I just want to call attention to if you've ordered the air valve complete kit, the air valve's already going to come pre-assembled. So then all you're going to have to do is install the new bearing and the new cup onto the air valve and then put it back into the center section. One other thing I want to call attention to is when you pull this air valve out, make sure that the bearing didn't come out with it. You want to make sure you keep your eye on the bearing, basically, if it's still in there or if it came out with the air valve. I'm just going to set this aside because we are actually going to rebuild this air valve. And I'm going to start by putting the air plate back into the center section, all right? So first thing I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to take that O-ring and we're just going to set it back down inside and make sure it sits in all the grooves. And you can put a little bit of the grease that came with the kit on that just to kind of hold it in place. You don't want to, again, over grease anything. It's just to kind of hold that O-ring in position. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to drop the air plate right up on top of it. And again, you can use a pick to help guide that in. Just be careful you don't scratch the surface of that plate. All right, after that, we're going to come in and we're just going to secure that air plate with the 2 screws. Then we're going to come back and we're going to torque those 2 screws 5 to 7 inch-pounds. Okay, once that's done, we're going to take our bearing and we're going to position that back down into the bottom. And we're just going to put some grease on that bearing. All right, we're going to set the center section aside now and then we'll start building back up the air valve. All right, a couple things. First of all, we're going to put the detent spring back in. Just going to put a little grease on that spring, put some right on the edge and then right down in the middle, and we'll drop it down in. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build up the reset pin. We have the O-ring that's going to sit down inside that hole. And again, just put a little bit of grease on there just to help facilitate a clean install. And then we'll put our reset pin in. And notice on one side there's a slot and the other side isn't. We want to make sure that the reset pin goes through the air valve with the slot, so the slot comes to the outside of the air valve. And remember, the washer sits beneath it. All right, we'll go ahead and set that aside and we're going to build up the rest of this. There's 3 pieces here on the slide that we're going to put together. I'm going to line everything up. And we're going to take our spring and our stop, and again, put a little grease on this spring. We'll put the stop in the center. And we're just going to squeeze that spring and insert it into that opening. And once that's in, that spring's going to hold everything together here. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to drop our detent ball on top of the spring, and then we're just going to drop the slide plate down over the reset pin, and then make sure that the plate sits on top of the ball. And you can see it's supposed to slide right back and forth. And I'm just going to drop it in there and put it in one of the detent openings. Okay, then we're going to come through and we'll put the saddle back on, secure it with the screw. And then once that mechanism is all put back together, you just want to make sure that the air valve slides back and forth properly. Okay, so once we're sure everything's secure, we want to make sure we torque that saddle screw 7 to 9 inch-pounds. Then we can come back with our air valve. And then we want to go ahead and grease things up a little bit. Again, remembering exactly what it looked like in the beginning of the video. We don't need to over grease this, but we want to make sure there's plenty of grease in there to keep things lubricated. Once that's done, one of the things you want to make sure of is we've got this O-ring down here on the plate or the cover of the air valve. Make sure that's in position. And we're going to bring the pump back in. And we're going to go ahead and reinstall this air valve. And what we want to do when we're doing that is, number one, make sure that this cup stays in position. When you tip it upside down, if it falls off, you may just want to put a little more grease on there. And that's just going to give it some surface tension so it doesn't fall off. The other thing you want to make sure is that the saddle comes in contact with the machined out section of the diaphragm shaft. So again, we're just going to kind of come in from the top side, tip the air valve up, set it in position, and set it down inside. And now we can go ahead and install our 6 screws. Once our 6 screws are installed, then we're going to want to come back around and torque these screws back to the right torque setting, and that's going to be 8 to 14 inch-pounds. And the other thing we want to do is make sure that we follow the right sequence. And there's going to be either a hang tag on the pump that you can reference or go back to the manual to get the right sequence. And that completes the air valve repair, replace, and install.